Hello, my name is Alan Kinlaw, and this is my story. I'm 36 years old. I was born in North Carolina, the youngest of three. I have an older brother, AJ Kinlaw, and a brother who was older than him, the oldest, Dan Kinlaw. Moved to Eastern Shore, Maryland when I was just a baby for my father to start a business. I was raised in a Christian home. My father actually ran a construction company, Kinlaw's Construction, and did a lot of work on the Eastern Shore with his business. My mother was actually a certified minister, and we grew up in church on the Eastern Shore, Maryland, actually going to Delmarva Evangelistic Church. When I was 5 years old, a Russian minister came to our church and shared the gospel of Jesus Christ, and even at 5 years old, I understood that what he was saying made sense. I don't think I really understood everything about it, but his message of Jesus drew me in, and he gave a very simple altar call and said, if you want to know more about this Jesus that I'm sharing with you, then I want you to come forward and I want to introduce him to you. And at 5 years old, I went forward without any coaxing or encouragement from my family. I went forward on my own, and he introduced me to Jesus Christ. And that was one of the milestones of my life. I knew at that time and that age that I was going to be a missionary. And it's funny when you share something like that with your parents at 5, even if it's a monumental movement in your life, they think that you're just a cute kid. But I can say that if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have survived. We grew up in a Christian home, but my father was manic depressive and bipolar. Constant mood swings, up and down all the time, extremely abusive, very violent. And we lived through that up until I was 14 years old. And at 14 years old, my older brother Dan was 16. He went swimming at a place called Cherry Beach, Delaware. And that was the last time that we ever saw him. The currents got a hold of him, took him under, and he drowned. And at that time, our home was very broken. The abuse from my father was getting out of control, and my mom really wasn't sure what to do about it. So about 6 months after my brother passed away, we wound up selling the home we lived in for 14 years. We transferred to a new school. Mom and Dad actually got a separation. And my father's depression took a turn for the worse. When I was 16 years old, we wound up moving to North Carolina, where I had been born and raised. My father still lived in Delaware. And 4 days after my father's 16th birthday, my father succumbed to his depression and wound up taking his own life. And at 16 years old, I was confused, extremely depressed myself. Didn't really know who I was or what it was that I was supposed to do. And more than anything, I think I was just mad at God. I wanted to make everything his fault. And so everything that I had been raised to do and everything that I had been taught was right and wrong, I chose just to ignore and to do what I wanted to do. I underwent a surgical procedure at 16, and they removed some teeth in order to install braces for overcrowding. And I was given a prescription for Percocet. And that was my first experience with drugs. And I remember the bottle clearly said take one every 4 hours as needed. And the first time that I ever took them, I took 4. And I would love to say that the experience that I had with that was not a good one. But the truth is that when I took the Percocets, aside from getting sick because I was overdosing and I had to actually expel the excess medication, the feeling that I got from that was as close to a normal feeling as I had had in a long time. And I thought that this was what I was looking for. And it's interesting how the enemy will use that to go after a person. The first day that I did that, I was in school. And in one of my classes, there was a kid there who was a known drug dealer. And he saw me. And when he was talking to me, of course, I was trying to fit in with him. And he asked me what I was doing and what I was on. And when I told him, he said, I didn't know you did drugs like that. And I said, oh, absolutely, I do drugs like this all the time. And he said, well, I'll make you a deal. If you give me some of what you have, I'll give you something tomorrow that'll change your life. So I gave him some of my Percocets, and the next day when he came in, he brought in OxyContin, which at the time was only being prescribed to terminally ill cancer patients. And so I went from literally day one doing Percocet to day two doing OxyContin and working a part-time job after school, making cash, and then hustling up work on the weekends. And then shortly after my father committing suicide, getting Social Security, that wound up being my life. From 16 years old up until I was around 22, I wound up using drugs every single day. I was a full-blown addict, prescription pills, medications, actually got tangled up in a bunch of other drugs and alcohol as well. And literally every chance I had, I could tell over this time that God had just been reaching out to me, and he was so patient with me. I remember the verse where it says that, even when we're faithless, God remains faithful. And I can say that God was truly faithful to me. He spared me from so many different things, but I can see so many times that he was reaching out to try and get me to quit. And it wasn't until September of 2006, September of 2006, I found myself surrounded in a drug house by guys that we had literally been on a bender with for over 2.5 months. And I was around 140 pounds. I had lost everything. I was about $60,000 in debt. I had been engaged to get married at the time and had lost my fiance. She wanted nothing to do with me. She realized who I was. And it was a Sunday morning. We got up and we're going to continue as usual. And the entire house changed. The people that we were staying in the house with decided they were going to turn to me to try and get money and drugs out of. And they actually tried to kill me. And I wound up running down East 7th Street in Lumberton, North Carolina with no money, absolutely no food. I hadn't eaten in days. And I ran until I found an old farm shelter. And it was actually just a little lean-to shed where they had been storing farm equipment. And I went into that shed, and when I did, my strength gave out and I just collapsed on the ground. And I'll never forget, I said a simple prayer. I said, God, I've been doing this and I can't stop. But if you can set me free, I'll serve you for the rest of my life. And the second that I prayed that prayer, I was sober like I'd never touched a drug. I felt an overwhelming peace come over my body that I had never felt before. And I can honestly say that I was never more high than I was when Jesus Christ came into my life. We have a saying amongst some friends of mine that there's no high like the Most High. And Jesus Christ completely saved and completely changed my life. He completely set me free. I didn't have a detox. I didn't have to go through anything along those lines. Literally, he took it all away from me. I slept for 3 days. And after sleeping for 3 days, I woke up and was a new person. And I knew where I was supposed to go. I went into a program called Teen Challenge. I was actually in Teen Challenge for several years. I stayed on there and served as staff. God was good enough to introduce me to my wife through this program. I worked for a ministry in Manchester, New Hampshire, and served on the worship team and the children's ministry there. And since then, God has blessed us with 2 beautiful girls. I have a 9-year-old, Lillian Grace Kinlaw. I have a 6-year-old, Eliza Ruth Kinlaw. And I knew that I was called to be in ministry, and God has been faithful in that as well now. And so now I actually pastor Gospel Light Church of God in Concord, New Hampshire. And this is just a quick testimony of who I am and what God has done in my life. But the beauty of the testimony is this. The Bible says that anyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. Anyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. And I know that I serve a God who's the same yesterday, today, and forever. And though this is my story, the beauty of it being my story is that my story is someone else's story as well. And I just thank you for the opportunity to share. God bless you, and wanted to let you know this morning that God is with you always. And anyone who calls on the name of the Lord will never be ashamed. So Jesus Christ saved and changed my life, and he'll do the same for anyone who calls on his name. God bless.